Dagon, woman! Dagon bellowed back at Gudrun, not bothering to look up from the forge. He turned the smith's poker over in the orange coals as Gudrun pushed her way to the open forge tucked in the corner of Lorlenalin's courtyard that droned with excitement of the evening's festivities. With ease, Dagon took up Thor's hind leg and held it between his knees. Briefly, he placed the hot bronze to the underside of his horse's hoof, confirming the correct shape one last time, before releasing the horse's leg and submerging the metal multiple times in a bucket of hot water. The metal hissed as Gudrun huffed, coming to stand within the smith's shop. "Couldn't you have Uthbert take care of this?" she said as Dagon lifted Thor's leg again. She glanced at the leather bag resting on the bench beside a collection of tools. Taking out a collection of nails, Dagon placed all but one between his lips. He pounded the first nail in, taking his time to reposition the crescent before taking up the second. "I didn't learn the craft so another can shoe my horse," he mumbled through clenched lips, driving the nail through the hoof wall. "Besides," Dagon flashed a knowing grimace at the stallion, who snorted, "Thor can be moody." Dagon placed a third nail into position. "Like his master," Gudrun said, striking Dagon's nerve. He pulled the nails from his mouth. "Speak, woman," Dagon said, returning the nails to his lips and bending his head down to continue. "Have you seen Kallan?" Gudrun asked with a dull pounding. Dagon positioned another nail over the shoe. "I've barely had time to get Thor fitted with new crescents, and already you've come to nag at my backside, woman?" Dagon lifted his eyes, taking the nails once more from his mouth. "There are places where a man should never be nagged, neither at the forge nor the table, nor with drink in hand. Now," he returned the last two nails to his lips and spoke from the corner of his mouth, "go away." "I'm not asking if you've spoken with her," Gudrun said. "I've asked if you've seen her." Mid-swing, Dagon glanced up with a curious eye. "We can't find her." "Check the warrants," Dagon said, and continued his work. "We did." "Well, stop looking for Kallan and start looking for Eilif." Dagon fitted the final nail over the shoe. "No doubt he's a footfall behind her." "We found Eilif," Gudrun said. "He said he was with her in the stables." "Oh, then there you have it." With a clang, Dagon dropped the hammer to the workbench in exchange for a metal file. Gudrun stepped closer, careful to leave him the space he needed to file the stubs to access metal protruding from the top of the hoof. "We can't find her," she said. "I wouldn't fret too much. Kallan's been taking off long before she learned the cloaking spell," Dagon complained under his breath. He inspected his work, adding an occasional swipe of the file where needed, ensuring the last of the nails were flush. "She hates to be sheltered, you know this, and putting a signet ring on that girl won't force her to stay with the boundaries she's been fighting against, and she could crawl." He paused to look over the finished job. "She's probably escaped the palace again for a breath of fresh air." "Perhaps," Gudrun said, but clearly fretted nonetheless. "All right." Dagon slammed down the file and released the horse's leg. With a comforted clop, Thor distributed his weight once more. "What aren't you saying, wench?" Gudrun didn't need the nudge. "She's different." He grunted. "The boy." Dagon, "It's not just the boy." Gudrun dropped her shoulders. "It was Eliasapher." "Who was?" Dagon asked. "The boy." Dagon shook his head. "No, he wasn't." Because if he is," Dagon said, "I'll kill him." The captain ran his large hand over his face with an exhausted sigh. For a moment he glanced up at the beams overhead. "Where's Kallan?" he asked, returning his gaze to the woman. "Well, that's what I'm trying to tell you." Gudrun stepped closer, lowering her voice as her eyes widened with worry. "She isn't anywhere, Dagon. This isn't about the boy." "Forget the boy," she said when Dagon opened his mouth to speak. "Kallan isn't well." Dagon shrugged. "Well, Kallan hasn't been well since her scythe is fading." Cocking his head, Dagon glanced to Gudrun, waiting for a better explanation than that. "She's found a way to stop it all," Gudrun said, lowering her hurried words even more. She was cold. She wouldn't respond. "That's Kallan," Dagon said. "Hear me," Gudrun said, pulling Dagon's hands together. "I felt it. I saw it. She has slowed the scythe to numb her grief." Dagon shook his head. "You know I have no understanding of this, Gudrun." She released Dagon's hands. "The scythe must flow. Without it, the body dies. It shapes, it grows, departing its hosts when the body dies to join with the scythe around us. But the scythe itself is always there in a constant state. As much as we must breathe, the scythe must flow." Dagon's brow wrinkled, understanding the urgency. "Kallan's found a way to change its state," Gudrun said. "The grief she harbors grows, and her grief rises. There is nothing left. The darkness is taking her. She empties everything into the shadows, feeling nothing just so she can breathe. But in turn it takes her will and slows the scythe." Gudrun sighed. "In silence I saw her screaming." Thor snorted, stomping his hind leg, and Dagon patted the horse's hindquarters. "Have you not taught her how dependent the Sikon is to the scythe?" he asked. As dependent as we all are, she knows this, but she doesn't know she's doing it, Dagon. She's too far beyond feeling to know she's doing it. Dagon nodded. I'll go to her. He was on his feet. Where was she? Ugh! Gudrun threw her hands in the air. We don't know. What do you mean, we don't know? Ragnar! Dagon called out to the streets, where a lone soldier led his horses toward the stables. Here, Ragnar called back. Find me Elif and Eric, Dagon ordered. Sir. Ragnar nodded and left to relieve his horse and carry out his orders. Dagon took up the poker, pushing around the red and black coals in the forge. Kallan had a page deliver the order of execution to me a day ago. When I asked to speak with her, she refused to see me. She's going through with it. Dagon nodded. I believe so. Gudrun grasped Dagon's forearm. A lifetime, Dagon, she said. All her life she has known nothing else. Her entire existence has been made of war and death. This is the first time she'll have to face life without it. She should be happy, but instead she clings to it. As much as she hates it, she depends on it. She needs it. As long as the war is on, she keeps a pot of ale with her. Dagon tossed the poker into the forge with a sharp clang. What I can't figure out is how far she'll go to keep this war from ending, Gudrun said. Dagon shuffled the last of the tools in order, rolling them into the leather to put away. We can't help her anymore, Gudrun. Not until she accepts her father's death. She's gone where we can't follow. With a sigh, he returned to the forge. She has to find her own way back now. The sun settled behind the far reaches of the sea's horizon, streaking the sky with orange and red light. Pines hugged and shaped a clearing where Kallan looked at the sea from the edge of the precipice. There the river began the Livsfang. Content to sit alongside Estrid, who munched the assortment of wild grass, Kallan watched until the last of the rays vanished beyond the sea. She couldn't delay much longer. Below, the city burst with an excitement over the evening's effigy. Her absence would soon attract attention, in which Gudrun would lead Lorlenalin's staff in an uproarious manhunt for the missing queen. Regardless, Kallan didn't move, deciding to extend her delay until they found her or the evening's cold forced her inside. The horizon squeezed out the last of the light and extinguished the last of day. Only the distant purples remained as night settled in. Kallan sighed, allowing an uneasy sick to churn her stomach. The end of the war, an era, and a new beginning peered over the horizon, and she could not stop it. Just a while longer. The world grew dark, and winds blew cold as the clouds moved in from the sea. Kallan shivered and hugged herself against the chill. Stubbornly refusing to go back, she opened her palm in front of her. Streams of gold emerged from the tips of her fingers, guiding the tiny threads. She called them out and back and turned them over, twisting them about at will, watching, amused with the threads of scythe until she forgot her cold. The winds changed, a darkness descended, and Kallan extinguished her seed. Wiping her attention to the shadows behind her, she stared into the trees with sharpened senses. Kallan narrowed her eyes and grasped the hilt of her dagger. With a flick of her wrist, she summoned a flame and looked deeper into the shadows. There a large umbra lingered, separate from the winds and forests. They were there. She had no doubt about it this time. She could feel them, and they were growing closer, stronger, closing in like the walls of Lorlenalin.